Hey, Bulls and Bears. My name is JJ. You're watching Bull Boom Bear Bust, back with another dose of economic reality. We've got a lot of pretty big news to get into today. But first, a couple things. 2 or 3 reports ago, I talked about a car dealer that did the bait and switch on me. A lot of people were asking what dealer was it. I'll go ahead and say it was Kia in El Cajon. I was there. I was there to buy a Honda. They sell used cars also. So a Honda, the 2020 Honda Pilot. Kia of El Cajon did the bait and switch on me. So some of you wanted to know. I guess many of you are in the San Diego area. So there you go. Kia of El Cajon. Beware, be cautious. Not just there, but at any dealer. And maybe try to get something in writing before you spend your time going into the dealer, because from what I hear from your comments after I put out that video, a lot of dealers do that. And someone even put out a link. They put a link out to another video that said 8 ways car dealers illegally try to scam you. I think something like that. And that was one of them, the bait and switch, where they have these hidden features, not hidden features, but features that aren't included in the price. And then when you go to buy it, they say, oh, by the way, this vehicle is equipped with these extras. So now you got to pay, a lot more in many cases. So interesting topic there. Another quick thing before we get started. Went into a barber for our haircuts, our family haircuts. We try to do them all at once. And the barbershop was saying, first of all, they don't accept credit card. They tell you they don't accept credit cards. Here's the thing. They want cash. That way they don't have to pay the transaction fee. I think, with the credit card, every time there's a swipe, the bank gets a fee. But also I think they want to keep it hidden from Uncle Sam. That's just what I think. They didn't say this, but what I think they're doing. But he says more people now are asking for exceptions and willing to pay just the actual $1-2 fee to use a credit card. Is it a sign that consumers are getting more stressed and have less cash, free cash, free cash flow available? Could be, maybe not, but that's what I found out at my local barber earlier. I was talking to him. I'm like, how's business? How's things going? Is there a slowdown? He said, not necessarily a slowdown, but more people are looking to use credit cards and having a harder time to come up with cash in many cases, right? Their haircuts are $25, so I can kind of see the point there. Let's get into some news here, folks. The demise of the dollar is something I've been talking about here for a long time, as the dollar is dwindling as far as global the currency, and foreign assets that are held in U.S. dollars are dwindling, basically. So there's an argument out there, though, that this would not necessarily be a bad thing for the U.S. to lose reserve status. So I don't always, but oftentimes I try to prepare people for the worst. And the demise of the U.S. dollar, the dollar losing reserve currency, could have massive implications here for the U.S. But here's an article here out of the Mises Institute. Probably didn't say that right. It's a good thing for ordinary Americans if the U.S. loses reserve currency status. So the point made in this article is that the reserve status being lost is going to mostly hurt government expenditures, such as the defense budget, the military budget, things like that, and not so much the U.S. consumer. So, I mean, look around the world, you see all these other countries that don't have the world reserve currency because the dollar is the reserve currency, but all these other countries, many of them are doing okay. Times are getting harder for a lot of people right now, but it's not the end of the world. My point is, as far as losing reserve status, there could be some implications. The Mises Institute is thinking it's mostly just government spending, wars, things like that. So not to all be negative, doom and gloom here. I do like to prepare people for the worst, though. And I don't think things are going to get easier going forward. I think things are going to get a lot harder for most people, but not for everybody. It may even get easier for some people. You may actually find ways to profit in this economy, where we're going to see, I think, a combination of deflation and inflation. Speaking of good news here, oil dropped again. Oil down to $74.40 as I'm reading this, $74.40. So very nice. I still think it's going to go up in the summer. We've got the output cuts, but we also have decreasing demand. Now, there's this thought out there that Americans are going to travel and spend money and swipe their cards no matter what. At some point, there's got to be a limit to the everyday consumer swiping cards and traveling, because, again, the U.S. households don't have an endless debt ceiling like the U.S. government. So I think there's going to be a slowdown in demand, right? So it's going to be this battle of the oil companies cutting output and the drop off in demand cutting output is inflationary because it lessens the supply, obviously. So we'll have to see how this plays out. I still think it's going to go up. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong on a lot of things that I talk about, but we've been right about a lot of things on this channel here over the past few years. First Republic Bank, the next bank that's going to need to be rescued. First Republic Bank handed out billions in ultra low rate mortgages to the wealthy. It backfired horribly. It's not just First Republic Bank. All the banks, maybe not to the extent of First Republic Bank, but all the banks are lending out money that they don't have. Ultimately, it will backfire. It is backfiring now. We've just seen a few banks, suffer the consequences. But the fear out there is that there may not be this guaranteed backstop for all the depositors at the smaller and the regional banks. So we see a lot of people rushing to the big mega banks. But then with people needing their cash, we're even seeing outflows from the mega banks and still falling savings rates occurring. Now, this bank's stock, First Republic Bank stock, is down about 98%. Can you imagine someone holding on to a stock or having a significant position in a stock that lost 98%? I mean, how do you recover from that? I mean, that's years of gains erased in just a matter of weeks. And that's what's so dangerous about getting in at or near the top. Now, some people may argue that this is not at or near the top. If you look at the broader market indexes, the S&P, the Dow, etc., the peak was at the end of 2021. We still have not surpassed that peak. We're still down over 10% on most of these indexes from that peak. So I think the top is in, but a lot of people are still heavily in certain stocks, and I can't imagine why people would be so heavy into bank stocks right now, especially after what happened. But First Republic down, that's the definition of a crash. They're down 98%. But speaking of banks failing, this bank technically has already failed. They had to have a bunch of other banks come in and inject about $30 billion in liquidity to keep this bank operational. So you can make the argument that it hasn't failed because it's still operational. But it's my example of someone swimming across a lake and going under the water. They couldn't make it. They weren't in good enough shape. They weren't a good enough swimmer. So a bunch of lifeguards had to jump in, or maybe one lifeguard, whatever you want the story to be, and bring them a life vest or life jacket and pull them out of the water. So the swimmer gets to the other side after being pulled out of the water, and the swimmer says, "Hey, I made it. I made it." Well, did you make it or did you get rescued? That's what a lot of the banks are doing right now. They're getting rescued. There's these emergency loans coming out of the central bank right now. So pick your definition. If you want to say they're not failing, they're failing. There's a lot of rescuing happening right now. There's a lot of lifeguards jumping in the water for swimmers that thought that they were in better shape than they really are. Let's talk about this. China is quickly becoming one of the largest automobile exporters in the world. My question is, where is the U.S. on this? Where's the U.S. on this, right? So obviously companies like to go to countries with lower wages, and typically, not always, but typically where there's lower wages, there's a lower cost of living. Otherwise, the people wouldn't be able to keep a roof over their head. That's happening in some countries, but we need to have the cost of living come down is what I'm saying here. If you want manufacturers to stay in the U.S. or come back to the U.S., we need to significantly drop or allow to drop the cost of living. And there's this fear out there, not from people like you and me, I don't think, but there's this fear out there from leaders, quote unquote leaders, that deflation is bad, that falling prices are bad. Well, it's bad in the sense that it bursts the illusion that the economy is growing, because when there's rising cost of living and rising debt, people borrowing money, bidding up prices of homes, cars, when people have money because of the lending system that allows them to pretty much buy anything, even things they can't afford, then that's going to cause inflation and a high cost of living. So when the opposite happens, when banks are restricted from lending out money they don't have, then you see the cost of living come down and prices come down, and that makes us a better place for companies to be because the wages aren't so high, and it makes us more competitive globally. So there's the argument that a collapse in the economy could actually be a good thing. It's very painful at first. People lose their jobs, and it's scary to lose your job. A lot of times, losing a job is a blessing in disguise. I know some jobs that I've lost. I used to have a very bad, back in my early 20s, I used to have a very bad time with attendance. I'd be up, late at night, not getting enough sleep, and just say, forget about it. Back before I had a family, so I could just call into work sick, and I got let go from a few jobs for attendance. It turned out ultimately, in most cases, to be better because I would go out and get a better job. So, I mean, not everything that happens that seems bad is going to end up bad in the end, is my point. So I'm trying to be a little positive today. Do you guys like my positive vibes coming out here today? Tesla's base Model Y is now over $750 cheaper than the average new vehicle in the US. So Tesla's been dropping prices very, very aggressively. And now the Model Y, which is one of the cheaper ones, is actually cheaper than the average gasoline new vehicle. So very interesting. I feel kind of sorry for people that ran out and bought Teslas here before the big price drop. Some of them were $5,000, $7,000, $8,000 from what I read, off of the price from just like less than a year ago. So pretty interesting what Tesla's doing. So do they see something on the horizon? Do they see an economic downturn? Why are they being so aggressive on these price cuts here? It's very interesting here. More on car repossessions out of Motor One. Delinquent car loans repossessions are rising in America. I know we've been talking about that here quite frequently, but I want to read you some of the wording out of this article here. Business is booming for the repo man as more people fall behind on their auto loans. You and I all knew this was going to happen here, and it's going to get a lot worse as we progress into the year. There's a storm brewing in the auto industry. In March, the percentage of delinquent subprime auto loans increased to 5.3% from 2.6% 2 years ago. So we have a little more than a doubling of delinquencies in 2 years, and this is going to accelerate. So I would expect this to double again, probably now in less than a year. And we're seeing a lot of subprime lenders out there being more restrictive on their loans, some of them folding altogether. And back to my story at the beginning about the car dealer that did the bait and switch on me, maybe it was a good thing. Maybe it was meant to be that I didn't buy a car at this time, because if lending gets a lot more tight than it is, we could very easily see some pretty big price corrections coming with automobiles. The problem is we still have to import so many automobiles. We're still making them here in the U.S., but we just talked about China, how China's becoming, is likely going to become the world's largest exporter of automobiles. Hopefully they're quality automobiles. My favorite two brands are Honda and Toyota as far as reliability. I've heard very good things about Subaru. I've never owned a Subaru, but I've had very good luck with those two makes. So those are the ones I try to stick with here. All right, so we're going to wrap this up here. What do you guys think about the somewhat positive news? The reserve currency status, not the end of the world. Maybe even some positivity could come out of that. Please let me know what you think about all this down in comments, folks. And come back to this channel. Like and subscribe if you like what we talk about. Help keep us operational. Big love. Keep stacking. Peace.